Alright, picture this. A nation torn apart by relentless conflict. A web of secrets and power plays weaving through its very fabric. At the heart of it all lies the power and peril of Asma al Assad, Syria's First Lady, a woman whose life is as captivating as it's controversial. To some, she's a symbol of resilience, a modern icon carving her path in a man's world. To others, she's the polished mask of a regime steeped in violence and oppression. How does a London-raised girl from elite circles end up at the epicenter of one of the world's most polarizing power struggles? Her story is a riveting tale of ambition, charm, and choices that sparked both admiration and outrage. Stay with us as we delve into the extraordinary life of a woman who walks the tightrope between hero and villain. This is a story you won't forget. Born in 1975, Asma Fawaz Akhras seemed to have it all. Raised in London, she lived a life many would envy, privileged, bright, and caught between two fascinating worlds. Her father, Dr. Fawaz Akhras, was a renowned cardiologist respected across both the Arab world and the West. Her mother, Sahar Otri, was a diplomat who represented Syria with pride and professionalism. From the start, Asma was immersed in a mix of Eastern traditions and Western ideals, a blend that would shape the woman she'd become. Now, imagine having every opportunity London could offer. Elite schools, a buzzing multicultural scene, limitless potential. She chose to leave it all behind for the rigid grip of a dictatorship. Sounds impossible, right? Well, not exactly. Asma excelled in her London upbringing. A standout student, sharp, eloquent, and brimming with confidence, she was the kind of person everyone expected to achieve great things. But she wasn't about to rely on her family's reputation to get there. Ambitious to her core, she carved her own path. At King's College London, she pursued a unique combination of computer science and French literature, a mix that perfectly captured her blend of logic and creativity. By the time she graduated, Asma wasn't just holding a degree, she had a perspective that bridged cultures, industries, and ideas. That edge propelled her into one of the toughest fields imaginable, investment banking. And not just anywhere, she landed at JP Morgan, a cutthroat world where only the sharpest survived. And Asma didn't just survive, she thrived. At JP Morgan, her sharp analytical skills, calm under pressure, and natural charisma made her a standout. She wasn't just closing deals, she was soaring, earning respect, and proving herself as a rising star in global finance. Her colleagues admired her not just for her technical expertise, but for her poise and people skills. For Asma, though, success wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. She wanted to prove something to herself and the world. Her future seemed set, with a promising career in global finance ahead. But then came the twist no one saw coming. One relationship would change everything, pulling her from London skyscrapers into a world of ambition, power, and danger even she could never have seen coming. Was it love? Destiny? Or something much more complicated? Hey, if you're loving this story so far, hit subscribe and let's uncover the rest of this gripping story together. Asma's journey was just beginning, and it was about to take a turn that would redefine her life forever. She crossed paths with Bashar al Assad. At first glance, Bashar wasn't the typical image of a future dictator. He was a soft-spoken, reserved, and trained ophthalmologist. Hardly the type that you'd expect to lead one of the world's most notorious regimes. But tragedy intervened. In 1994, his older brother, Basil, the charismatic and groomed heir to their father Hafez al-Assad, died in a car crash. Suddenly, Bashar was thrust into a role he neither wanted nor was prepared for, and that twist of fate would completely change Asma's future too. Their connection wasn't just some whirlwind romance, it was something much bigger. It wasn't fiery passion that defined them, but purpose. Bashar and Asma's relationship became a meeting of ambition and understanding, a calculated collusion that soon placed her at the heart of the Assad dynasty, one of the most controversial and oppressive regimes in the Middle East. In 2000, the same year Bashar became president after his father's death, Asma married him. She gave up the freedoms of her cosmopolitan life in London for the tightly controlled, high-stakes world of Damascus. It wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a seismic shift. Gone were the skyscrapers and bustling boardrooms of JP Morgan, replaced by the shadowy corridors of a police state, where every move, every word was carefully calculated for survival. At first, Asma seemed like she might be a reformer, a modern, polished First Lady who could bring change. But was her elegance just a mask, hiding the grim realities of a brutal regime? When Bashar rose to power, Asma faced a choice: stick to her ideals or adapt to the dark, twisted world of Syrian politics. From the beginning, Asma seemed determined to shake things up as Syria's First Lady. She didn't follow the traditional mold expected of her. No veil, no quiet obedience. Instead, she embraced a sleek, westernized image, a stark contrast to the brutal, authoritarian regime she was now part of. With her polished British accent and professional charm, she quickly became a symbol of hope for Syrians and a media darling abroad. Some even called her as Desert Rose. She stood in front of rural crowds, talking about education and empowerment. She promised progress, appearing at events solo, without her husband in sight. For a while, Asma looked like the bridge between two worlds, the suffocating autocracy of Syria and the progressive ideals of the West. But guess what? That image was just that, an image. Beneath the polished surface, the Assad regime's grip on power remained as tight as ever. Fear, oppression, and control weren't just tools of the system, they were the system. If Asma had dreams of real change, they either clashed head-on with the brutal reality of her position, or maybe she understood from the start that real reform was never on the table. As time passed, her role became harder to pin down. Was she breaking barriers, or was she just a more modern face for an old, oppressive regime? Was she complicit in the brutality, or was survival her only option in a world where stepping out of line could bring about her downfall? One thing was clear. The world she entered was far darker than the polished, hopeful halls of London. For a brief moment, she seemed like a paradox. Hope in a regime built on despair. But was that hope ever real? Or just another carefully crafted illusion? And get this, even the international media got tangled in her web. Vogue once articled, "The Rose in the Desert." Yup, that actually happened. They ran a glowing profile in 2011 describing her as glamorous, young, and very chic, the freshest and most magnetic of First Ladies. She was painted as this modern, multitasking superwoman, a First Lady juggling motherhood, charity work, and politics with effortless style. But then, they pulled the article after the Syrian civil war broke out. Even Vogue knows when to pull back. As bombs tore through Syrian cities, the palace stood untouched, a bubble of luxury in the middle of chaos. But behind the glamour of Asma al Assad's life, a darker reality was playing out. Her humanitarian projects, once hailed as acts of compassion, were increasingly seen as tools of propaganda, carefully crafted to distract from the regime's brutal grip on the country. People started asking, were her efforts genuine or just a shiny cover for unimaginable crimes? Then came 2011. The Arab Spring swept through the Middle East, toppling regimes and sparking demands for freedom. In Syria, peaceful protests were crushed with shocking violence, plunging the country into a devastating civil war. Hundreds of thousands of lives would be lost, and the world watched in horror. As the conflict escalated, Asma's image shifted. The woman once celebrated as a modern reformer began to be seen as the regime's most polished defender. While families were torn apart, leaked emails revealed her shopping online for luxury items, diamond jewelry, expensive furniture, even designer shoes. One email captured it all. "I need more Louboutins," she wrote, referring to the iconic red-soled shoes. Meanwhile, entire cities were reduced to rubble. Inside Syria, some hailed her as a warrior queen, but internationally, she became a symbol of complicity, with sanctions branding her as part of the machinery behind war crimes. And she wasn't just standing by. Asma became a key player in the regime's propaganda machine, appearing on state TV to rally support for Bashar and blame Syria's suffering on foreign conspiracies. With calm, calculated speeches, she painted Syria as a victim of external enemies, carefully ignoring the regime's role in the bloodshed. It left the world wondering, was Asma al Assad a victim of circumstance? Or was she always a part of the regime's brutal plan? The lines between reformer and accomplice had never been more blurred. As the war dragged on, Asma's role in the Assad regime became impossible to ignore. She wasn't just a polished First Lady standing in the background, she was a trusted advisor to Bashar, shaping domestic policies and even influencing the regime's strategies on the world stage. Her Western education and fluent English made her a key player in crafting Syria's image for an international audience. But that kind of power came with a price. international sanctions hit her hard, freezing her assets and banning her from traveling. To the West, she became a symbol of everything wrong with the Assad regime: corruption, cruelty, and complicity. Her critics, on the other hand, saw her as no different from Bashar, her hands just as bloodied by the regime's crimes. Even now, as the Assad regime holds on to power with help from Russia and Iran, Asma continues to play a critical role. Her charm and diplomatic skills have been crucial in maintaining these alliances and securing the support the regime desperately needs. But no amount of diplomacy can hide the cracks. Syria's economy is in ruins, its infrastructure shattered, and its people divided. Millions are still in exile, unable or unwilling to return to a country that no longer feels like home. For Asma, the image of the modern reformer is long gone, replaced by a far more complicated and controversial legacy. In this fragile empire, Asma al Assad's position is a delicate balancing act. She holds significant power, but her fate is completely tied to the survival of the Assad regime. If it falls, she's not just losing her privileges, she could face prosecution for her role in the regime's crimes. It's a jarring contradiction. One hand championing empowerment, the other propping up a brutal system of repression. So who is Asma al Assad really? Is she a victim of her circumstances, trapped in a system she can't escape? Or is she a willing accomplice, using her influence to help sustain a regime built on fear and oppression? The truth probably lies somewhere in between, a murky middle that perfectly captures the complicated, often unsettling nature of power itself. As the war in Syria rages on, Asma al Assad's legacy is still up for debate. For some, she'll always be the rose in the desert, the woman who symbolized hope during dark times. For others, she's the ultimate hypocrite. Her elegance and poise is just a mask for her role in a regime responsible for unimaginable suffering. Asma al Assad, reformer, survivor, or enabler. Her story is a powerful reminder of how ambition, circumstance, and choice intertwine in the pursuit of power. What would you do in her shoes? Was her path shaped by circumstance, or did she make deliberate choices? We want to hear your take. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Check out our next video on Melania Trump, another captivating First Lady. Don't miss it!